question, and we'll come right to you. And Steve, if you have one, we'll start with you.
Hey, Zach. Obviously the offense has been struggling quite a bit here recently, but it's pretty much been all season long. What do you think has been the reason, if you can pinpoint a reason why so many of these guys who have track records of better seasons just seem to be underperforming?
Yeah, that's the tricky thing, right, is figuring out why. I mean, we have, as you mentioned, most of our hitters are underperforming their career norms. A little part of it is that offense is down across the league, but that's not explaining our situation. And with some guys, as we've gone through the season, we look at different things with each individual. It's an individualized approach. So there's never one simple reason. Sometimes it's the guy's mechanics, getting those on track. Sometimes it's their approach at the plate, what their plan is when they go to the plate. But it can be a lot of different things. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly why, but it's usually pretty complex.
I know you're speaking now about the individualized approaches. That was one of the reasons you made a change with the hitting coaches earlier in the season, was to get more of that individual type of approach. A few months into that now, just what is your level of satisfaction with the change that you made and how that seems to be going?
Yeah, so the way I look at hitting coaches is it's about what they're doing on a daily basis, how they're working. I think I've explained this before, where there's different tasks that a hitting coach has and the team of hitting coaches have, and that's to be able to identify and evaluate what's not working for a player, especially at this level, major league level. Most of these guys have track records. They're pretty polished compared to, in the minors. So you're trying to figure out, understand what makes this player tick, what makes him be his best version of himself, track when things are not going in that direction and course correct as soon as possible, and figuring out ways how to do that, having good drills to address the specific issues, to talk through the, whether it's mechanical or an approach, which, like I said, we've seen all the above this year, which is why there's been several players underperforming. So that work's been going on. I'm satisfied with the work, the level of the work that's been going on. It's the right things to be talking about when we're talking about these issues. The big question is, then why didn't you see better results, obviously? And, that's the thing that's difficult to get there, and it's not for lack of effort. We're talking about this on a daily basis, whether it's, always asking ourselves in baseball operations, how can we do something better? How can we help this player get back to who he normally is? So all that stuff's going on, and it's a stone uncovered, no stone unturned type of approach, which is what we need to be doing. So that work is good, and I'm satisfied with that, and I think it's definitely better than what I was seeing earlier on, which was clear that we needed to make a change. At some point, you have to have results, though, even if the good work's going on behind the scenes, and that's just not happening.
Tim, on the right.
On that same topic with the individualized approaches, can you go into any more detail about the current thinking with your department about why Conforto, for example, isn't doing too well, or Lindor, McCann, what some of the reasons individually might be factoring in there?
Well, I'm not going to break down those players publicly, but it's similar to what I just said to Steve. There's some of those guys had some mechanical flaws going on that you'd see them kind of tighten that up. You'd see some flashes of getting back to their old selves, and then they kind of fall out of it. And trying to understand why they may fall out of those things at times, it's challenging. Sometimes you get in search mode when you've been struggling, and it starts snowballing on you a little bit, probably mentally. That you look up and you see your numbers every day, and you can't get those back to where you expect to be overnight. It takes time. Baseball is certainly a grind, and so they need to just keep grinding and trying to focus on the little things, really focus on very small things to make these hopefully big differences over time. But it's not going to happen all at once, so you got to stay in a good mental state too. So that's the other part of it. I talk mostly about mechanics and the approach and your plan at the plate, what you're looking to do against a specific pitcher, trying to dictate and control your at-bat and beat them that way. But there's also the mental component too of how are you handling having the season you don't want to have, having a disappointing season. And I think all of the above is what, contributes to these things. It's never just one simple answer. These things are very complex, and that's why it has to be individualized, because it's different for each guy.
And with DeGrom, he's a few days away from being 2 weeks into his 2-week shutdown. Do you guys have a day that he's going to have that next MRI?
That's the next step, right? Shut him down for 2 weeks,
Right.
re-image, see where the inflammation is, and then kind of have a plan of care from that point on. I don't know off the top of my head the exact date, but yes, I know we're approaching that. We're probably about, 10 days into the 2-week period. So yeah, that'll be happening as expected.
And he's not back with the team yet, right? He's still
Correct.
Tending to. Is he in DeLand or Miami? Do you know?
He's bounced around. I don't really want to talk about it since
Gotcha.
it's for personal reasons.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Tony in the middle.
Hey, Zach, how would you evaluate just your performance staff as a team, and specifically with regards to some of these soft tissue injuries that keep popping up? Are those coincidence in your mind, or is there something systemic that needs to be addressed?
I don't think there's a systemic issue. We talk through each one of these injuries as they, one, we talk through preventative measures. I've been impressed with the performance staff overall. We've been having good conversations since I got here. They are very well educated on good preventative methods and good rehab treatments post-injury. I think with some of the soft tissue injuries, again, it's a case-by-case basis, the reasons, trying to understand why, every time there is something, there's always a process of, okay, is there something we could have done differently? What could we have done better? They're always having that dialogue before the injuries as well, because the key is to try to prevent them. But, in some cases, you can have the best plan, and if the plan's not followed, that's not going to, necessarily yield a good result all the time. So sometimes that's the issue. Sometimes, some of our injuries, the non-soft tissue, we had quite a few of those too. Guys getting hit by baseballs, things like that. But on the soft tissue, we've talked through each one. There's nothing that stood out to me as, some egregious mistake that in our process, in our treatment, in our training that led to it. I think there's specific examples where it's clear kind of how something could have been handled differently. And most of the time, I'll be honest, it's compliance issues.
In terms of what could have been handled differently in those cases?
Compliance, it's like factually following the plan.
Gotcha.
Because these are all individuals and control their own bodies, and sometimes they're not as compliant as they should be, and that happens. I've seen that happen in the past. It's, again, going back to the individualized approach. You got to take ownership of your career and your health as well. So it's really an easy narrative to put it on performance staff or put it on hitting coaches, but it's not. That's oversimplified. This is a partnership, and those groups and the players, and everyone has to be, pulling in the same direction.
And also just quickly on Baez, Louis mentioned it was maybe more of a lower back thing than a hip thing. What exactly is his issue?
It's what he said, he's feeling more tightness now. It's a symptom. You're treating the symptoms at this point. He's day to day. He could be available off the bench tonight, could be back in the lineup as early as tomorrow. It's just, he tweaked something and is feeling just some discomfort, some soreness, and so go from there.
Justin?
Hey, Zach, DeGrom has seemed pretty confused as to the why of some of these injuries this year. Have you guys gotten more answers on just why these have kind of compounded on him, a lot of these maybe minor things until this one?
With Jake, he's had a few different injuries related to swinging. And then the most recent one is, I think, really the only one of significance that's related to pitching. So the other ones were kind of fluky freak type of things, which weren't, and they weren't significant or major because he came back fairly quickly. This one's obviously more significant because he's going to miss more time. Anytime you get shut down, it's always more significant. So, and when you're talking about a pitcher's arm, elbow or his arm from pitching, then you need to make sure you handle that appropriately, especially someone as important as Jake.
And then is Lindor's timeline still the same as kind of what you told us a couple weeks ago at the deadline?
Yeah, he's still, I'd say at this point, week to week. But yeah, he's progressing well. I wouldn't say anything's different.
Thanks.
Dave in the front.
Hey, Zach, over here. With now the deadline's passed, I mean, what you can do to improve the team is kind of gone, right? At least from outside. How comfortable and confident are you with Louis's ability to get the clubhouse kind of in the right? Are you comfortable with the mindset that these guys have? Are you comfortable that they're all on the same page with this? And, you know, are you confident that Louis can help these guys pull out of it?
Yeah, I don't see our issues on the field as being a mindset problem. I think the guys, and specifically Louis, one of his biggest strengths is, I think, comes in handy when you're having tough stretches, which is to stay pretty consistent, pretty even keel, positive and supportive within the clubhouse walls. So, you know, that's not the problem. It's just the performance on the field. And, you know, caring's not the problem. Everyone cares. You know, people are banging their heads against the wall, losing sleep, trying to figure out how they can help other people. I'd say, you know, as far as what you said at the top of that question, which is, you know, what we can do, what I can do, or my department can do to help the team at this point is more limited. Obviously, that's true post-trade deadline, but there's still things, you know, our job is not just about acquiring players, but it's about setting them up for success. So, you know, we're not going to stop exploring ways to improve how we're supporting them because we need to, you know, we need to play better than this.
Just on that, like, what's your level of concern with the way this team has gone into a funk in the past week that you guys can figure this out? I mean, I know everybody's been optimistic about it and stuff, but I guess there can be different levels of concern as how deep that you guys could be in trouble.
I mean, I wouldn't say, obviously there's plenty of games left and we have a chance to still compete and win this division. So it's baseball, and, you know, being in the game for a long time, as you guys know, that there's always a chance. So you can't get too down or too high when things are going well. That said, you know, we've played very mediocre baseball for most of the year. This recent stretch has been much worse than mediocre. We've taken mediocre at this point. For this stretch, it's been unacceptably bad, and we need to be better. But, you know, we're not going to panic because you can't do that in this game. Baseball is a tricky sport in that it's a precision sport, right? So in football, like, you can get angry and go hit people harder. You probably do that in some other full contact sports. You start squeezing the bat too hard or the ball too tightly, then, you know, you're probably not going to perform very well. So you got to find that middle ground between a sense of urgency, because, you know, we only have 50-something games left. So you got to have a sense of urgency, but you can't be so tight that you can't perform up to your ability. That would be another problem if that were to happen. So that's the tough thing, is trying to remain calm, stay within what you can do, not try to do too much, because then things can snowball and get even worse when you're struggling to score runs, especially.
Rich in the middle.
The progress of Syndergaard, and the question is, how's the progress going? And secondly, when and if he returns, and I guess a lot of it depends on Jake's return too, do you see Syndergaard as absolutely being someone you'd put in this rotation, or do you see him as someone that you might put in the bullpen to kind of prep him and maybe help the bullpen out with some innings? I mean, where do you see his role being when and if he returns?
I think I've said this before, that he's someone that's obviously has a lot of talent, has the potential to impact the game. And at this point in the year, I mean, we just mentioned sense of urgency. I mean, coming in and contributing in a shorter relief outing, whether that's a 2 or 3 inning outing or whatever it may be, I think, you know, getting him to help the big league club is the priority when you get down to these last couple months of the season. So if we can get him to come back in a relief role faster than you could, which is typically the case. Typically, you want to stretch a guy out to be a starter. It's going to take longer rehab. So I think, you know, we're looking at September. Getting him back in September in a role where he can help the club in relief would be a good thing for us to do.
Back to Tim.
We're on the performance staff topic and compliance issues with some of the players. When that stuff pops up, was it addressed with those individuals?
Oh, of course. I mean, and I'm not saying that to like vilify players. It's just part of what happens sometimes. It's part of what happens with us as regular non-athletes when we're trying to, you know, actually take care of ourselves. We kind of lapse on certain days. And you know, these guys are professionals, and they, for the most part, they're locked in on what they're supposed to do. But sometimes, you know, it doesn't take much for things to kind of, you know, maybe you're not eating as well as you could. You've got to change some habits, or maybe you're not hydrating enough, even though everyone's on you to hydrate. You know, at some point you got to take that responsibility. We're not just going to, you know, stick a needle in someone to hydrate them all, you know, because they're not doing it themselves.
And for those who maybe don't know what you mean or what Rojas means when they say performance staff, would you summarize that as the medical staff, the training staff, all of those and more?
Yeah, all of those and more. Then you have, you know, those groups that you mentioned. So you have your trainers, kind of your rehab specialists, your doctors, your sports science area where you're trying to stay ahead of the curve on kind of using technology, data and technology to help figure out better ways to optimize human performance. So it's all those groups.
And then separately, real quick, Steve Cohen said in early July that he would have a comprehensive response a month ago to some of the issues involving minor league pay and housing and things along those lines. Have you guys made any changes there? And if not, are there changes coming?
So we were making some changes when that became a public issue. We were already going through. So one of the things, you know, as I'm obviously new to the organization, our leaders in player development are new people to the organization. In year one, Sandy's back, Steve's new to the Mets. So year one, there's a lot of assessing going on. You know, where can we make improvements? How are we, you know, with minor league players? You know, these are players that are really important to our future. Are we doing the best we can to kind of set them up for success? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. So yeah, we were exploring those things. We had made some changes. We've since made some additional ones. You know, I'd leave that, if Steve's going to give a more comprehensive response, I'll leave that to him as far as all those details, if he wants to get into that or not. And that's not to say, you know, hey, we're treating minor league players better than anyone's ever treated. I mean, there's always things we can learn and how we can get better. But we have to realize that obviously they're important to us, short and long term, because they provide us depth and future impact, hopefully.
Thank you.
Pat, over on the left.
Regarding the aspect of not being too tight that you can't perform and do your job on the field, do you feel like the players offensively have been pressing a bit maybe during this stretch?
I don't have a sense of whether that's the case, just from, it's hard to know. You know, you talk to players, I mean, they're big leaguers. These guys they're good at what they do. They aren't fearful. They wouldn't get here if they had a lot of fear. A lot of these guys have been playing in a tough market like New York, where there's a lot of eyes on you and a lot of pressure, and so you never get that sense that they're pressing, but I think it's a normal human thing to do. And I think at times, you know, there's been definitely some incidents where it was clear when you kind of break it down that someone was coming a little bit out of who they are and trying to do too much, which to me is almost the definition of pressing. So I definitely think that happens. And that's the key thing, is to try to nip that in the bud so you don't have this, like I said, this snowball effect.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we've covered everybody. Thanks, everybody, for attending.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Zach.